This is the sensor for the fuel pressure on the fuel rail as well as the fuel temperature. Here underneath the intake manifold is the cylinder head temperature sensor. Here we have the wiring diagram for the Acura with the throttle position sensor down here, and I've highlighted each wire coming out of it. The yellow wire is the 5-volt supply from the PCM. This yellow wire here comes straight from the PCM, comes to kind of this junction here, and supplies 5 volts to 2 other sensors as well. The red wire is the sensor signal. Here comes out, and what's really interesting is here, I guess to this point, and for the 97 and 99 models, it goes to the TSC control unit. But for the 2000, 2004 models, it comes out and it goes straight over to the PCM under TPS here. And then there's also the green wire as well, which is just the sensor ground. That's
Go ahead.
okay. So we have our voltmeter on the 5-volt reference for the throttle, and we're gonna pull the blade open, and the voltage should drop down from where it's at right now at about 4.5. Should drop down to just under 1 at full throttle. Go ahead and film it. 2.7, 2.2, 2.1, 2.5, 1.4. Yeah, you can't really pull it all. Here we have the ohm meter hooked up in line with the throttle position sensor, and at closed throttle it is sitting at 0.867 kilo ohms, and as it slightly increases it goes up and more and more, and at full throttle it sits at 4.91 kilo ohms, and again as the throttle closes it goes down to fully closed throttle. Here's the pico scope for the Acura. I'm going to pull on the throttle blade and the voltage should change. So sitting normally at closed, it's just above 0, and at full throttle, it goes roughly to about 20 to 30 millivolts. Here we have another wiring diagram. This is for the Chevy Equinox for the temperature sensors, and we have the engine coolant temp sensor here, with the tan wire being the low reference and the yellow wire being the signal. If we go over here as well to the last page, we also have the mass airflow sensor as well as the intake air temp sensor. They're one unit. Again, tan is low reference and the light blue wire is the signal. Here we have the temperature resistance readings for what is supposed to be all temperature sensors in the Equinox, because it does not specify, and this is all I could find for it. But of course here gives the Celsius reading, the Fahrenheit reading, and the ohms. On the high end starts at 302 degrees at 47 ohms, and of course goes down to -40. Also for the lab, we were using the AC-Tron scan tool, the orange scan tool for the testing, so unfortunately we can't get voltage readings for the sensors off of those, so we were not able to do step 5 or step 8 because those require the voltage rating for the sensor. So we were able to do everything else but just not those two. However, for step 8, of course, if you took the intake air temp off, it might not change with your body heat, but yeah, if you put a heat gun on it or if you put ice around it, it'll change the value. We saw a change in real time from the engine warming up for step 9. But yeah, unfortunately we were not able to do these 2 steps with the scan tool we were using. These are the 2 temperature readings for the Equinox. The coolant is displaying a normal reading of 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about what it is in the lab. But the AUT is a bit higher at 97 degrees. That could be because of a low resistance, since a negative coefficient thermistor reads higher temperatures as lower resistance. And you could test that by looking at voltage readings or ohmmeter readings, seeing if the resistance is too low, if the voltage is too high. And you could test around the circuit for the AUT to narrow down where the problem is coming from. Here in the Equinox, we unplugged the ECT sensor and immediately it dropped down to -40. It was at about 68 degrees before, which is about right. That's the ambient temperature roughly in the lab. And yeah, we unplugged it and instantly dropped down to -40.
So this is our IAT plugged in. And then this is our IAT reading when it is unplugged, and it shows a -40, which would communicate that there's an open in the circuit.
In the Equinox, running the temperatures for the ECT and the IAT, before the coolant was about 68 degrees and the IAT was about 97. However, after starting the vehicle, the coolant has gone up to 90 already, which would make sense, the engine is running, but the IAT dropped back down to 73, which is about the ambient temperature in the lab. Not quite sure why, but yes, it was 97 before with the engine off and dropped back down to 73 when the engine was turned on. Here in the Equinox, started and waited for it to warm up. The cooling fans kicked on not very long after startup at about 110 degrees of coolant temperature, and the thermostat opened at about 140, 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Intake air temperature has stayed pretty steady. It was at 73 right after startup, still at 77. But yeah, the coolant was at 150, 140 when the thermostat opened, and about 105 or 110 when the cooling fans came on.